Welcome back, or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glicini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is the start of year 2 for this podcast, so thank you to avid and new listeners for tuning in. This is episode 25, and my guest is Lyle Thompson. Lyle was named Player of the Decade by Inside Lacrosse. At the University of Albany, he won the Tewaaraton Award for Division I Lacrosse's best player twice. In 2016, he was the first pick in both Major League Lacrosse's and National Lacrosse League's drafts. In 2017, he won a Champions Cup and was NLL's most valuable player. 2 years later, in 2019, he won an MLL Championship and was named MVP again. Today, he remains a pro lacrosse player, Nike athlete, and N7 ambassador. He is the CEO of Thompson Brothers Lacrosse and president of the For the Future Foundation. Perhaps most importantly, he is a father of 5 children. A Native American from Onondaga Nation, arguably the best lacrosse player ever, and a humble leader. I'm grateful to call Lyle a friend, and I'm stoked to have him on here today. Lyle, thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thanks for the massive intro there.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this conversation.
So I'd like to start where it started for you, your upbringing and main childhood influences. How would you say those influences have impacted the work that you're doing today? Who were some of your main mentors or people you looked up to for guidance and inspiration when you were a boy?
Yeah, I think I guess I'll start just by growing up on the Onondaga Reservation. I actually grew up two different reservations, the Mohawk Akwesasne Reservation and Onondaga. But both places, we grew up without much money. Not that we're poor, and I never had realized that we didn't have much money because I was always given, a home cooked meal, good friendships between my brothers and my sister and my family, and just a really good support system. So growing up, I never had like idols or people I looked up to outside of my own family. It's sort of weird to say and think of, but like my father played the game, my grandfather played the game, and I got to grow up. I grew up watching my father play. So we'd travel to different reservations, different arenas, and I got to watch him play. He won 2 Senior B President's Cup championships, and he set a good example for us, but he was just always there. So my father's definitely one, and then my brothers, me being the youngest of us 4 out of the boys, I really had nowhere. I didn't feel like I needed to look anywhere else for someone to look up to, because I always looked up to Jeremy, my oldest brother, and I was always at his games, and he was a leader himself. So I think having my older brothers sort of be friends and just be really good leaders, they were sort of paving the path for me, and I just followed in their footsteps, had fun with the game, and for me, out of us 4, I spent the most time playing the game because I was just completely in it right from when I would say my earliest memory of just like being outside and playing the game was 6 years old. And I'd go outside, rain, snow, winter, muddy springs, and I had my wooden stick and I'd play for hours with or without my brothers. And that was what growing up was like. Once I got into lacrosse, that was my main passion. I always struggled with the educational piece, the schooling part, and I never envisioned had a goal of playing lacrosse at the collegiate level or even the pro level. Within our communities, lacrosse is massive. Summertime, you go to a Native American arena, they're full. The whole community is there, and that's where I want it to be. So not to say I didn't dream big, but like that's what I was able to see. That was what was in my vision, was just to play at that level and play in front of my community and have that sense of community there. It wasn't until my brother start getting sort of recruited that I start looking toward the college route and start putting goals on playing professional.
I love that. I was going to wait till later because I've been a teammate of yours and I have the privilege of being a teammate of your brother Miles right now. But could you describe even more what it was like growing up with your brothers? I know you say you looked up to Jeremy, but what was the dynamic like? Is there a story that you remember of you trying to learn from them? There's something my mentor likes to talk about of like expectation minus education equals frustration. And I know you said you struggle with the education point, but you learning from your brothers is education in and of itself in a lot of ways. So what was that dynamic like with your brothers growing up?
Yeah. I think the first thing I also got to explain is, like I said, we grew up without a lot of money. I wouldn't say we grew up in poverty, so I don't want to make this sound like I grew up in poverty, but we grew up without electricity, without running water. And that was simply just because our road was newly established and we didn't put like a water line or an electric line through yet. So during the day, we had no business inside. There was no such thing as a video game for us. There was no such thing as watching TV. We got to watch TV like once a week on a Friday night when we were a little bit older. So I spent a lot of time with my sister and my brothers outside every single day. We got into different things. A lot of it was sports. A lot of it was nature. And for me, being the youngest brother, I got a lot of getting beat up on, a lot of sort of lessons there. So I think it made me tough. You know, they'd call me a big baby, but, but I think one of my, and this doesn't really align with my brothers, it more so aligns with the way they see me. But like when I was younger, like I said, I'd play lacrosse in all the elements, and I used the traditional wooden stick. My father taught us a lot of life values through our sticks. The cultural aspect, you know, that it came from something living, a tree. The leathers were made from something living, an animal, the cat got the ball. So he taught us those things through the stick, through the game, those sort of cultural values. And I just remember like being out in the rain, and we had a pond across sort of behind our net. And if I hit a post, there's a good chance the ball's going in the pond. But I'd dig my stick right in there. And my brothers would be like, "What are you doing? Like, you're ruining your stick. Your leathers are going to get hard. You're going to break your stick this way." And I always just thought in my head, from what my dad taught me, this is nature. This is me connecting with my stick. This is the importance of my stick. And I have a relationship with it, and we can both adjust to each other. You know, if my leathers get hard and it starts to overthrow, I know that when my leathers get hard, it's going to start to overthrow. I know that when my leathers are frozen, it's going to shoot a certain way, and I adjust to that. But it's understanding and having that relationship with my stick that I just remember that story from my brothers and them sort of always bashing the way I treated my stick. But it came full circle where they were able to learn from the way I treated my stick. And each, especially, you know, this at a professional level, the one common theme you see at the professional ranks is the players have a deep connection with their stick. Before the game, they need a certain tape job. They have their rituals. They need to tighten their knots. They need their leathers, their shooting strings to be a certain way. And I just think that's so like fascinating to me that like at that level, that's what you see. That's what the locker rooms look like, is a deep connection. And everyone has a different way of doing it. You see it, like some people are throwing softballs in their stick to make it wide. Some people, you know, are keep it by them sides, like Zed Williams. You know, someone like my brother Miles, he only uses one stick. He won't have a backup. So like little things like that, you see these things, but all it comes down to is just deep connection with a lacrosse stick. And I think that's what separates our game than any other sport.
Yeah, I've always looked to explain it because I started the sport much later than you did, right? I played all these different sports, but once I found lacrosse, there was something so special about it, and it's been uh, years to try to put the right words to it. And perhaps you just did it in a couple there, but there's a deep connection. You find somebody all over the world playing wall ball or throwing with a stick around. You're going to ask them where they play and what's their story, and I think that's so great. And I mean, I want to segue right into the fact that your passion bleeds through. I mean, you're an inspiration for many, especially in the world of sport and lacrosse, including those that might be older than you. So, a simple question that I could ask you is what drives you? What are some of the main reasons for your relentless work ethic of playing through any conditions? Your seemingly endless creativity that you can see on multiple highlight reels and all throughout your college ranks and pro ranks, and then your service to others. So what drives you? I know it started as a deep appreciation for your stick and gratitude for the game, but what about when you got older? What drives you?
I think I think when you break the game down and its values and sort of its life lessons, I always break our medicine game down to respect, playing with a clear mind. That doesn't just mean playing with a clear mind. That means operating in life with a clear mind, not just in the game. That's outside. And what a clear mind means to me is being an optimist, seeing the good in things, regardless of the circumstances or the conflict that's going on in your life. It's just being able to have that. And I learned that from the game. And right from a young age to the oldest, my last one, which to me comes the most natural. Not everyone's come this natural. You know, someone might pick up the respect aspect a lot easier or being an optimist more easier. But the last one for me is passion, having fun. That has always came really natural to me. Being out in my backyard, being on a field with my team, being at practice, it's just fun to me. You know what I mean? I don't need a teammate. I don't need a whole team there. I don't even need my brothers there. I just need my stick and a net to shoot on. Not even a net to shoot on. I grew up without a net, just a wall with a hole in it. So that's what drives me. And I always try to, at the professional level, you always have to continue to grow. So when I'm not having fun with it, I try to be able to find those things. Sometimes you got to use tradition. Sometimes you got to use different tools. You got to get into this flow state and be aware of what helps you get into this flow state. The flow state to me is simply the zone. You know what I mean? When you talk about athletes playing at their peak performance, they're in a state, they call it the zone, but what helps them get there is that they're not thinking about a future moment. They're not thinking about a past moment. They're not dwelling on a past moment. They're not thinking about winning or scoring the next goal. They're just entrenched in what is happening right now. And they're in that moment. So whether it's playing a game or in my practice field, that's sort of what drives me, because I'm aware enough to know that I don't work the best. I'm not working my best when I'm in a state of stress. So I always try to stay in a flow state, and I just have to have fun with it. So some days, I'll give you an example. Like, for the most part, when I go out and shoot in my backyard or when I work out, I have a common theme of routine. I'll go outside, I'll put my cleats on. Um, you know, I'll get out there and I'll start off with some shots, just straight up shooting at some corners, and then I'll get into some drilling, some footwork. But sometimes that just doesn't work. Sometimes I'm like, all right, I feel like going back inside. So you have to change it up. You have to make it so that, all right, let me dodge from max and get really tired. Let me practice on inside rolling. Let me practice a hitch. Let me practice strictly overhand shooting, going back to the fundamentals. Let me practice on picking up the ball. You know what I mean? So all these little things, I just try to find ways to make them fun. And if I'm not having fun with it, I change it up. I make it a little bit different. Sometimes I'll practice with my field stick. Sometimes I'll practice with my box stick. So I think a huge part is just trying to get into a flow state. And the other part of that, you're asking like, what drives me? I also know that like the game doesn't define me. So when I play the game, I know that when I step on the field, I always say it's not all about winning. That doesn't mean I'm not trying to win. I always say play with a clear mind, but that doesn't mean I don't face conflicts throughout games or throughout my experiences. It just means I have the ability to overcome those conflicts pretty quick. And to me, that's what playing with a clear mind is. And it doesn't mean I'm not competing. I'm not a competitive person at the highest level. I still want to win. I just know what works for me so that I'm optimal, so that I'm playing at my highest level. And if my mind is cluttered, I'm not going to do that. And when I step off the floor, I also know that the game doesn't define me. And there are bigger things in life. So I always try to just stay in the moment, enjoy the presence, and play the game I love. Make sure I'm enjoying it.
You gave such great things, and I really want to break it down into three things there. One is you always said you were changing it up, right? You have your routines, but you're changing it up. The opposite inside the mental game of a flow state is a slump. And they say a slump is like a soft bed, easy to get into, but hard to get out of. And the best known trick is to find the difference that makes the difference, whether it's your pregame meal or the way you warm up or what you do, changing up the drills. I love that. And one thing that I would like to add is you get back to your breath. When everything around you seems to be going off, you can always get back to your breath. And that's the only way you can at least marry your heart rate a little bit and get into a little bit more of a calm state. Something you said is you like to compete, but you love the game. Anson Dorrance, UNC soccer coach, won 21 national championships or more and has won at the world stage, says that up into the college ranks, you can win on competitive fire alone. And then at the pro and world stage, you need a love for the game. And I love how you introduce both of that, the competitive fire that you have, but also the love of the game. And the next question I want to lead off into is what you said is that that the game doesn't define you. With your brothers, you started a foundation. Could you elaborate on its mission? Perhaps why you felt the need to start it, and what's your ultimate vision for it?
So I'll just start with our ultimate vision is to create information, create access to information, and whether that's through mentoring, whether that's through camps, whether that's through access to equipment, regardless of what it is, we want to be able to help underserved communities and instill a sense of community in these communities. So instill some leadership qualities. That's a huge part of our mission, is to be able to go to these underserved communities, because for the most part, what we've seen from our experience traveling to, just reservations that are in the middle of nowheres, inner city Denver, we've been to Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, like these places that don't have much. Sports are a huge part of what helps them, but they don't have no guidance. A lot of the parents, a lot of the elders, a lot of the kids have no direction, no help to really instill these leadership qualities. So we wanna be able to help with that, and that's part of our main mission. And what it started, it was, for a lot of lacrosse players, professional lacrosse players that are making a living off of the game, we do lacrosse camps. And when I got out of college, we were doing camps everywhere. Felt like we were the circus, and we would just hit these towns and make a buck. So I'm guilty of this sort of I don't want to call it destruction, but like this negative energy towards the spirit of the game. I'm guilty of it because I took part in it, took part in the destruction. But we would go to these places, we'd make a buck, it was easy money, and it was all in suburb communities, places that had, more money, and it just didn't feel purposeful to me. We would go to these places and it didn't feel purposeful. So, and then I'd go to a native community who somehow scratched up the funding, found a grant to get us there, and they did all this hustling to get us there, and I'm taking money from them. And it just felt guilty. I felt guilty doing it, but it also felt purposeful because I could see the effects I was having in that community. And we always wanted to go back, but we couldn't because they couldn't afford that. So we wanted to create this foundation so that we could go back, and not just once, but like a lifetime of communications, create a relationship with these communities so that we could instill leadership qualities, so that we could instill, this isn't just a lacrosse thing. Lacrosse is only 10% of what we're trying to do. We want to create access to information. We want to help kids get to college if that's what they want to do. We want to help kids know ancestral foods because that's what we need. Within our communities, we have very high rates in obesity, diabetes, alcohol abuse, drugs and alcohol abuse, and lack of education. I've experienced that, and I have so many friends that struggle with a lot of those things I just listed. The educational piece, the one thing I'll say is my mother made it to, dropped out in 8th grade. My father finished up high school and went off and he worked steel. He was an iron worker. And they knew nothing about college. By the time my brothers were getting, Jeremy and Heina, the older two, were getting letters from every single Division I school, every single school. And they didn't even know the route. They didn't know that there was a such thing as NCAA clearinghouse. They didn't know they had to get good grades. Just the most simplest things were struggles because of lack of information within our communities. So that's just an example, a small example too. So we want to help with, one of the things we're doing is creating this digital library of information for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people so that people can learn about mascot issues and some of the things we struggle with, but also within our communities so that these kids and these parents and these elders have access to information that they've never had. And then to go back to like the camp style thing, the one thing on the for-profit thing we're trying to do with Thompson Brothers Lacrosse is instill the spirit of the game and honoring the game again. So instead of going to these working with clubs and just running a clinic, we want to make sure it's more purposeful and it's more educational. Instead of just teaching these kids skills, we have to make sure they understand the values of the game and what comes with it, and how everyone always asks, how do I honor the game? Or everyone says they're honoring the game and they're not really doing it. So I think right now the state of lacrosse really needs to understand the creator's true purpose of putting this game down here on earth. And it's turning in more and more to a sport, but it's a game. And at the true core of things, a game is something you do with a joyful intention. Sport is something you do with the intention of dominance or winning, self-enhancement. So at the end of the day, yes, you can still compete to win, but also honor the game and understand that it's not everything. You still have to have respect. You still have to instill optimism, and you still have to have fun. If you're spending the whole game focusing on winning for 1 hour and 30 minutes, you're not enjoying the game to the full extent. A lot of people think they are just because they finished the game with a W. It's not true. You know what I mean? You just spent an hour and a half playing, stressing about focusing your mind was somewhere else. So to shorten things up, in a bundle, I just want to help the state of the game understand the roots and the purpose of the creator's game.
It's such a powerful message, and thank you for sharing all of that. You almost gave me chills as you were talking. I was writing along the way and sticking with it, every single word you were saying. When I was starting Mark Glicini Peak Performance in my business, the three words that came to mind was inspiration, guidance, and empowerment. You talked about guidance of the values that you want to instill and the leadership qualities. That's important to me too. But one thing that really stands out and is just so vibrant about For the Futures Foundation that you guys are starting is the empowerment side of it, right? You want a lifetime communication side of things. You want them to be able to take it and become whoever they want to be as well. One of the things that I know is very close to your heart, and I just want to add to the conversation is, could you elaborate for listeners about past and current discussions and circumstances around the Iroquois Nationals, Indigenous sovereignty and community, and the messages you'd like to share about those things?
Yeah, so I guess to tell the backstory for the listener who doesn't know the full story. With the Iroquois Nationals, we've been a part of the Federation of International Lacrosse since, don't quote me on the exact date, but it was right around 1987 to 1990. I know my dad wasn't in the first game, so he played in 1990 when they went to Australia. So we've been a part of this, and for a really long time since it was established, and even to date back, we were competing in Olympic trial games back in the early 1900s, between Canada, US, England. Back then there was they formed multiple different Canadian teams. But back to my point, we've been a part of international games for a really long time. They've accepted us in. And what had happened this past summer, was they announced that we're going to be qualifying for Olympics. And in qualifying for the Olympics, they changed from the FIL to World Lacrosse. And there's just going to be this event in Birmingham that hosts all sports that are qualifying for Olympics. So whether it's, cornhole or karate or lacrosse, all those sports will be there qualifying so that they could be into the Olympics. And we didn't get the invitation. The Iroquois Nationals, our invitation got lost in the mail, I guess. But when I seen it, we were down at the MLL Championship, and I thought it was just a mistake. But then it sunk in, and everyone was blowing it up, and I realized it wasn't a mistake. And I was like, oh, all right, this makes sense. This happens to us every 4 years. Something like this happens to us every 4 years. And basically, what we've become is the Indian problem. You see it everywhere. It's between instilling pipelines to playing at a national sporting event. We became the Indian problem, where they think we're slowing down the process. So they think if you have the Iroquois Nationals, who's not recognized by the US or the UN as a nation state, it's going to hurt our chances of lacrosse, hurt our chances of sport to be qualified into the Olympics. So they didn't send us an invitation. And it is still going to be a battle. That we've got accepted into the World Games, but we're not accepted into the Olympics yet. So the Olympic Committee at some point is going to have to accept, if they accept lacrosse, they're going to have to accept the Iroquois Nationals. And I'm curious to see what the lacrosse community does when that happens. But I think there was so much good that came out of this situation, because lacrosse as a community really came together and showed support for doing what was right. Politics aside, they showed support for doing what was right. Because at the end of the day, our fight for sovereignty, it's been a fight for hundreds of years. And we've been recognized as a sovereign nation because we have treaties with the US, we have treaties with the Dutch, we have treaties with the English in Canada. And what a treaty is, that's an agreement between nation and nation. So if you think we're US citizens or Canadian citizens, what does that treaty mean? Does that treaty mean you made an agreement with yourself? If we're Canadians or we're Americans, and they accept our passports when we travel the border, but just not through flying, which I don't understand. That we have our own language, we have our own government, so we fit the criteria to being recognized as a nation for the Olympic Committee. We're just going to have to see if they accept that.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that it goes from thought-provoking to action-provoking for sure. And thank you for sharing that. Lyle, loyalty is a word that comes to mind when I think of Lyle Thompson. On top of the accolades and points, but those aside, it's evident how loyal you are to your family, the game of lacrosse, your community, brothers, teams. Where would you say that honor, that reverence, that respect for others in your corner comes from?
I think it just comes from family. You know what I mean? Having I don't really know the answer to that, because growing up, you have to, if you agree to something, if you commit to something, you can't turn your back on it. And I mean, you can sniff those type of people, you can pick them out. And to me, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to commit to it. And I don't want to be someone who's going to beat around the bush. So if you ask me to do something and I don't really want to do it, I'll let you know. I'll let you know that that's not in my repertoire, or I don't have the space for that, the energy for it. But if I agree with it and I want to be a part of it, I'm gonna commit to it, and I'm gonna be loyal to it. And I think that was instilled through, again, my mother and father, the way they brought us up. I always got to give a lot of credit to them, and I think as a child, you always have to give your parents so much credit, even your elders in your community, because to me, all your experiences, all your knowledge, all your wisdom each individual has, it's just recycled. It's nothing new. Your thoughts were thoughts by somebody else before. And I understand that. And technology changes, language changes over the years. I think my job is just to simplify it so that my generation can understand the words that my ancestors were passing down. Not the words, the actions, the meaning behind the things that were being said. So that's a huge part of, I guess, my pillars on how I operate, is always making sure I'm simplifying some of the things I learned, because especially within Native America, Native knowledge is really important right now. It's really trending too. It's weird, but it's really trending that, like, people are fascinated by Native Americans and Native wisdom. And I've been able to learn a lot from my elders, and it's not always passed down because our communities are so small. So sometimes it's complicated and hard to understand. So I always like to try to simplify things.
Somebody near and dear to my heart once said that simplicity is the final destination. So I love that. I couldn't agree more on the thing that you said about credit and recycling things and learning from others. That's why I always start these interviews, podcasts, whatever you want to call it, with asking you what's your influence, right? Who you grateful for. We'll get to the full of greatness. We'll get to the peak performance side of the discussion, but there's somebody that you owe a thank you to for building you up. One of the teams that I became a part of much more recently, but you've been a part of for a very long time, but you represent the Nike brand. Can you share what that's been like to be a part of Nike Lacrosse? How do you feel that the work that you're doing, the training and the playing that you're doing aligns with the brand of Nike and Nike Lacrosse?
Yeah, I think Nike's treated me really good. And, I think Nike can help the game of lacrosse. I don't know how to say go to the next level, but they could really add to the game of lacrosse. in storytelling, because that's what Nike does. And they did it for a little while with us. And I think that we can continue to make Nike, that's something me and my brothers always do. And our manager is put pressure on Nike, because we're just a small piece over at Nike. Lacrosse is very small over at Nike. And you always got to put that pressure on. You always got to sort of continue to nag, so that, because this is our game, this is what we really care about. It's changed our lives. So I know it can change a lot more. And but Nike's been really good. We did some limited edition shoes with them, a line with them, and they I think they did a really good job of storytelling with every single line. Storytelling our stories, storytelling the roots of the game, the history of the game. But I think a big thing for us was, it was just really good to partner with a brand like Nike, and to really continue to push them to help lacrosse, because lacrosse is still small, and they're a massive company, worldwide company, that can really add some value to the spirit of the game, for one, but also just the participation of the game of lacrosse.
Absolutely. Same reason I align with them as well. The double bottom line of voice and storytelling and what they care about. And it's not just about the sport. It's about the game and things that it teaches you all along the way. My first coach in lacrosse that gave me the stick and put a stick in my hand always said, you have to flirt that line between being annoying and tenacious, and that's how you get what you want, whether it's on the field or otherwise. I love on your Instagram, in your bio, it includes one line, short and sweet, working on myself. What are some of the strategies and routines that you do to work on yourself, Lyle? I see your interest in kettlebell and recovery, but what are also some of the things that your favorite things to do to work on yourself?
No, yeah. No, I definitely, the reason I really put that there was because I was just going through a time where, and for a long time, I don't have a really good relationship with social media. Social media is such a weird place for me. And, at that time, I deleted everybody on my social. I went through back and forth between deleting the app itself and my addiction to these social networks. If you ever watched what's the documentary called?
The Social Network.
Yeah, the Social Network. That's what really, I was onto myself before then, but that just really made me commit to, like, okay, I really got to set some screen times, do this and that. And it's not helping me. It's not helping me internally. It's not helping me spiritually, and it's not helping me grow. So at the time, I deleted everybody. I put that as my what do you call it, bio thing, quote, and just focused on myself. If I click on that app, it was just going to be me, because that's who I was looking at. And if I want to upload a video, if I want to upload some content, it's going to be stuff I'm passionate about. It's going to be stuff I want to do. It's not going to be influenced by anybody else but me. So, and then just to put that, like what you said, some of the things I work on myself daily is, and it might come off as a lot of sort of woohoo, but I do a whole lot of meditating. I have my own medicine place, and I do a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of poetry, a lot of drawing, just like a lot of the things I knew I was passionate about since I was a kid. So what I've been able to do, and what this pandemic has really helped me do, is take me back, be that child again. So I grab my stick every single day. I go out and play for like 45 minutes at least. Sometimes I'm out there for like 2-3 hours, but like I do it every single day. I mean, it's snow here right now. And then I start in my notebook, I made a to-do list. And I made it small because I don't like to have big to-do lists. What I found over like 2020 was I'd make my to-do list too big, and I'd only end up tackling like 2 or 3 things. So I start making it smaller. And throughout 2020, since the new moon, which was like the 13th or 14th, that's sort of our new year within Native America. I've set new moon intentions, and it was just to draw more, write more, meditate more, and play more lacrosse. Those are things I love to do. So those are things that really help me work on myself. And working out is also a massive passion of mine now. Growing up, right through college, Coach Mar, he let me get away with too much. When I was in college, I never had to work out. I would sit in the other room. The whole team would be working out, and I'd be chilling with the guys who were injured, working on like band stuff and stretching and body weight stuff, and I'd just hang out over there. Part of it was because I think I was a little bit self-conscious of myself. Like I wasn't strong. I always played off of talent and skills and stick skills and athleticism, but like strength-wise, I wasn't a strong. Like the dudes were cleaning, 2, 3, 4 plates, and I'm over there. I can't even clean 85 pounds in college. And so I think a part of that was that I was self-conscious. But once I got to the pro level, I knew I needed to make a shift. I knew I needed to get my body healthier, stronger. And I went through some bodybuilding stages where I put on a lot of muscles, and yeah, it was a lot of muscle, and it was good, but it caused some injury. So I might have been rushing it a little bit too much. I strained my back, hurt my wrist, torn my rotator cuff in college, and that was just nagging all through my professional career. And that's what made me pick up a kettlebell. One of my trainers was like, yeah, I think you should start to do some body weight stuff. Focus more on mobility, make mobility your focus. And when I did the body weight stuff, I couldn't stand doing body weight stuff. So I grabbed the kettlebell, and a good follow is On It. They sell kettlebells, and I start sort of replicating some of the content they were putting out, and going back to the flow state. I would just get lost in what I was doing. I would just, it wasn't so hard. It wasn't so stressful that it was difficult. It wasn't so difficult that it was stressful. And it wasn't so easy that it was boring. And that's the whole, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he coined the term flow state, and that's how he explains it. It's like, so he creates this graph, and like there's it goes up, and if it's too easy, it becomes boring. Just like Tetris. If Tetris, when you're on the easy level, it just gets boring. But if it's too fast, it becomes stressful, and you give up and you don't want to do it anymore. But if you're right in the middle where you're advancing, and you sort of get lost in time, that's the flow state. And that's what I found with the kettlebells. And huge thing, like for me over the past 2 years since I've started kettlebell training, my mobility has like skyrocketed. I've been able to maintain strength, which is what I want for longevity in the game of lacrosse. Like we don't need a ton of, in my position anyways, like I don't need to be super strong anywheres. I do focus on my legs a lot and my balance. And then, I've been able to, and then stability and speed is another thing I work on, but that's separate from like my kettlebell stuff. I'll do sprints once a week, and I'll do some long distance running, like once a week. Not long distance. I'll just run a mile for time.
Well, it's very evident, if anybody follows you, you know what you're into, you only do what you're passionate at, which is so awesome. 2 stories that really come to mind. One is that I've learned recently was from a meditation teacher named Rand. And I was having a conversation with him, and he was talking about Stephen Covey, who wrote this book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey was over in Japan, and he was staying with a Japanese family, and they were having tea. And Stephen Covey said, wow, these glasses that we're using for tea, they're so marvelous. And they said back to him, yeah, they've been in the family for 200 years. And Stephen Covey laughed, and he said, wow, I can't keep glass in my house for a couple of weeks without breaking something. And they responded to him and said, that's because, Stephen, when we clean the dishes, we only clean the dishes. And I love that story because it has everything to talk about focus, right? And what you were talking about with flow state. Flow and focus are not too far away. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary that Kobe Bryant died. and Kobe Bryant is talking about his 81-point game over a mic, and he says, yeah, I don't even remember what happened. I don't even remember what happened that night. I had 81 points. And that's what you were talking about, the flow state. And adding these new things like you talked about earlier, right? If you don't grow in the professional game, you can call it quits now. Why don't you? And I was never into yoga, for example, or meditation. However, somebody defined yoga as spiritual, emotional, and physical alignment. And I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm going to do this once a week because I found like, okay, it's no more something that has to be done. It's an experience and a process that I can figure out along the way. And going along that thread of what you figured out along the way, wow, you've been playing this game a very long time. I picked it up in 5th grade, but you've had it since you were a young baby boy. What are some similarities and differences about the Lyle from growing up to the one I'm having a conversation with today? Are there any important lessons that you've learned along the way that really stick out in your mind that you wish you knew then, but you know now, and it's made all the difference?
Yeah. First, I want to comment on like the yoga stuff. I encourage everyone to pick up yoga too, and because the great thing about yoga is what I found. My wife's a yoga instructor, so I sort of have access to yoga all the time, and I do yoga every day. But when I first got into yoga, I would go into the rooms and I would just be like, I'd have that competitive mindset where like these girls are like outdoing me. And I'm like, I can't let this happen. And I would do it through stress, the whole class. Like it would be super straining. And I'd end up almost overstretching myself. Like I'd end up sore the next day from yoga. And then like I start listening to the words of the instructor. I start letting her, like opening my mind to the words she was trying to convey. And it's simple. It's like, understand your body, understand what's good for you. And this is your practice. I mean, like, stop comparing to everybody else in the room. This is your practice. If you can't do a movement, then don't do it. Do something else. Like, you have an instructor there, but you don't have to copy them movement for movement. So that was really good. And I have to give credit to like yoga for a huge part of my, my mobility spike, if you will.
And mental growth, right? And mental growth.
Yeah, for sure. But then back to your question, like the Lyle from a child to now, when I go back to my core values, what I've mentioned multiple times, and I'll continue to say it over and over again, because I think it's important to have those pillars to always not make things too difficult. You know what I mean? You just have to be able to know that this is my job and this is what I do. You know what I mean? Don't get distracted by other things. So like for me, my pillars, I always go back to respect, optimism, and fun. And when I look at my childhood, fun was dominant. That was a 90 percentile. I was 90% having fun when I would do things in sport. Optimism was 1%. And respect was 9. That's how I would break it down. My father really did I can't just say my father, but my brothers, my father, and my mother, and my sister really instilled, like, helped me balance those things so that I wasn't everywhere. So I wasn't just dominant in one, which is not bad. You can be dominant in one, but make sure you're not dominant in competition. You know what I mean? Like, don't continue to extend your pillars, because then you're just going to get confused. In the middle of your mind's going to go everywhere. So what I'll say is, from when I was a kid, the Lyle that's changed is I've been able to balance those things. I've been able to operate with like a 33.333 whatever percent on each one. There's times that go up and down, like the Philly incident with my hair. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously the optimism aspect, that wasn't working that day. You know what I mean? Something happened for me to take me out of that state, to take me out of operating from a 33.333 3% from my optimism state. I couldn't play with a clear mind. I should have. I wish I had. But for the first time in since I was a kid, I was playing lacrosse angry. Even when I was a kid, I never got mad because there's so much racial things and ignorant things that are said to me as a kid, mostly by parents. When we'd go down to Maryland and Long Island for tournaments, the parents were just so ignorant, and it would influence the kids to follow their lead. One of the stories I had was I was playing down there. I forget, it was in Annapolis or something. It was a random tournament when I was a little bit older, probably 10th or 11th grade, and I went to the sideline. By then I was ranked the #1 high school lacrosse player by Inside Lacrosse, whatever. And one of the parents was like, "#1 who? Who are you?" And then it just trickled in. All the parents start bashing me. One of them told me to cut my hair. Another one told me to go back to the res, go back to where I came from. It's just all this little things that don't affect me. And even then, at the high school level, the bad thing about this conversation, you're hearing this conversation more, but the bad thing about that was I just accepted it. I didn't even tell my teammates about it. I didn't tell my father, who was my coach, about it. I was just well, that happens. And I just brushed it off. And subconsciously, I don't know if it actually got to me, but I remember it. So it must have. But I was able to still play with a clear mind. So that just goes to show, I was able to play with this clear mind since I was a really young kid. Used to get in a lot of fights in school over my race, I guess you could say, to categorize it. But in Philly, that was the first time in, I would say, right around 20 years that I played the game of lacrosse, gripping my stick and mad. And I went back and watched that game, and that's the biggest thing I regret about that, is that I gripped my stick and you could tell I was mad. I was looking off my teammates. I was trying too hard to score. I was playing from a state that wasn't where I'm optimal. But going back to it, I've learned so much from that. And I would say that's the biggest difference, is now that the older me understands a lot of these lessons that my ancestors were trying to teach me through the game of lacrosse, I'm able to understand them and instill them. Whereas when I was a kid, it's all just about having fun, and a huge part of it was about competing and winning. It's really competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love, respect, optimism, and fun. I was listening to a podcast, and there's this woman named Dr. Krista Scott Dixon. She's runs Precision Nutrition, and she has a deep health model. And she was talking about change, and she said it usually takes 1,000 paper cuts, and then maybe it's that 1,000th one makes you really snap and get angry and change. And maybe that's what happened, right? It's 1,000 paper cuts. You don't know all along the way. You're letting it go, letting it go, letting it go, and then you play angry. And when I look to teach the mental game about loving the process, one of the definitions I use in mental training is how to be intense without being tense. And what happened in Philly was you just got tense for the first time in forever. Maybe it was the 1,000th paper cut, but I'm so happy, and I think listeners are going to love those 3 pillars, because they're timeless and they're so valuable. You talked about simplicity before, and one of the things that I kind of want to bring up is the advice that you could give to a younger athlete, or perhaps the advice that you give to your kids right now on a very simple conversation. What do you find yourself repeating to your kids, or what advice would you give to a younger athlete that wants to get better and perhaps is trying too hard and is looking to navigate becoming a better student athlete? What do you know now that you could share, or what's a repeated message that you oftentimes say to your kids all throughout the week?
I'm that very spiritual parent that my kids, kids really don't, I don't know, I can't speak for all kids, but my kids are really quick to shake their head at me and just be like, shut up, Bubba. And or like when I'm about to give them, like I'm the parent that's like, sit down, let's have a deep conversation when there's conflict. And they're just like, oh, like, here we go. Bubba's gonna give us a spiel. But I think, the common thing, I wouldn't say I say to my kids, but I try to instill in what I would try to give advice to any kid out there is to be able to find routine. Child anxiety is a massive thing, and it's not just in adults, it's in children. And when you have your day planned, when you have what's next planned, there's no room for that anxiety, that thought of what's next, that question of what's next. So I think a huge part is to be able to find out, to be able to start routines, and some would call them, they turn into traditions. And obviously traditions can lock you in a box. Traditions can make it so that, like, you think one way, or like for an example, like if you have a superstition, that's a tradition for the most part. I would say if I have to tape my stick before every single game a certain way, and for some reason I wasn't able to tape my stick that day, a tradition says I'm gonna play bad. It takes faith out of you. It takes this confidence out of you. Whereas I think there's an extent to traditions. So if you're able to make routines and just be like, this helps me get into a certain state. If I tape my stick this way, it makes me feel good. For an example, like when I go down to work out every day, I have a routine, and it's just really silly. Like I go down, I fill up my pre-workout, I come up, I meditate, I sip on my pre, I go back down, and I make sure I have my mat, I make sure I have my kettlebell, and then I usually sit there in like a child's pose for like 5 to 10 minutes, drinking a cup of water. Like after I finish my pre, I fill it back up with water so that I can count my water intake. So that's something I like to have. It's a ritual of mine, and now it's just second nature. So to instill that, it helps me get into a flow state for my workout. Whereas if I didn't, I don't know what's next. I'd have to change it up, but I just know that it helps me for now, for the time being. So my advice to a lot of kids is to create a schedule. And I think a lot of parents can help kids create that schedule. And like what I do with my kids, the day is planned before every single day. The night before, we have this whiteboard up on our cupboard, and the kids know what we're doing the next day. And sometimes it changes, but it never goes too far off. And then you get to this routine where you're waking up the same time, you're going to bed the same time, you're eating lunch the same time. And my kids know what's next. And I think the same goes to not just everyday living, but like being optimal with sport. Like if there's a lacrosse player listening to this, create a routine while you're in your backyard, or your wall ball routine. Like those little things are important, and they go a long way because you're creating habits. Habits are huge.
I couldn't agree more. Routine, schedule. One of the things I wanted to add to you, and it's really just along the same lines, is that we're so activated by having an aim, whatever we have the next day or down the road, rather than attainment, right? When you're done with attainment and you attain something, then you have to go back to the whiteboard, right? But Robin Sharma gives, and I talk about these all the time, ways to improve your self-love, help others, get outside, do something difficult daily, and then honor your special. And I think that has a lot to do with it. But there's a quote that really comes to mind, and it's training is like sweeping the floor. Just because we've done it once doesn't mean the floor will be clean forever. Every day the dust comes back. Every day we must sweep. And it's Daniel Bolelli. But I really love that, because that's what life is all about. It's just the same. And that's what greatness has a lot to do with, in my opinion, is the consistency of the routine every single day. So without taking too much of your time, I have a few last questions for you. You're a veteran in this game. You've accomplished a lot already. Are there any boxes that you still want to check off in lacrosse, or what are your main goals now at your age and where you're at? Does it all circle back to your love of the game and you just want to keep improving, or are there certain things that you're really gunning for?
No, I think I do set goals every single year. But a lot of them, they never go far off of my core values. So it's nothing crazy. It's not like winning an MVP or scoring a number of goals. For me, when I set my goals, they're more so set into my current state. So like, for an example, one of my long-term goals is I want to play until I'm like 40 years old, and I want to create that longevity. So what's that mean? I have to train that's going to create longevity, whether that's strength training, mobility training, lacrosse training, all that kind of training. That's how I have to train if I want to meet that goal. And it's not just I'll never know if it's just gonna happen. I just have to create habits, going back to the habit thing. And then like winning a championship, like obviously that's always a goal for mine. But I have to break down, what does winning a championship mean? What does that mean for me? That doesn't mean I have to score 100 goals this year. That means, okay, I got to make sure I'm building team chemistry. I got to make sure I'm helping my teammates wherever I can. I got to make sure I'm leading by example. So they're sort of simple and weird, but they're good reminders to be able to write something down and set those goals.
Couldn't agree more.
And it helps me. It just helps me like operate. Always have something to look to when I don't have those sort of pillars that I go by every single day. When I have more definition to what I'm actually doing.
What just continues to ring in my ears is what you said probably 20 minutes into the conversation, is how once you stop growing, that's it, and it's very evident in all your answers that you're always looking for that improvement, whether it's building team chemistry or working on yourself. It's impossible to argue that you're not a great already because of what you've done as a lacrosse player, but also as a leader, like I mentioned in the introduction. But I want to turn it over to you for one last question that I'll ask everybody. For your definition of greatness, in your opinion, in your eyes, how do you define greatness?
Damn, that one's deep, man. How do I define greatness? I would say greatness is it's aligning your passion. Greatness is aligning your passion and your purpose. And when you align your passion and your purpose, you become powerful, you become strong, you have great strength, but don't confuse what power is. So what I would say is like, it's flowing through you. It's sort of, when you align your passion and your purpose, it's sort of this energy that's flowing through you, and it allows you to create this impact, this energy that goes out into the universe, and other people are able to be influenced by it, impacted by it. Because I think, I think a lot of people confuse what power actually is. You know what I mean? Like a powerful person or something that's powerful. They think like, power could be bad or good. But I think strength is understanding yourself. Strength is knowing that sort of you're only being used. You're only this moment in time. And yes, it is great to, for instance, I like to always explain things with an example. So for someone like me, I think the Creator gave me strength, and the power is just what's influencing people. Whereas Creator also gave someone the same strength. Someone out in the world is just like me and understands the world just like me, but their voice might not be as loud. doesn't mean they have a higher quality of life than I have a higher quality of life than them. They're still strong. They still have plenty strength. Their power isn't as vibrant into the world. That's just an example. So like when you look at someone like Oprah or these really like influential people that has transcended a generation, all the greats, Kobe, like these people, they understood themselves to a crazy level. They understood the world, and they're strong. That's their strength. Their power, they're just a vessel to power. Creators just sending them power so that their voice is loud enough for them to transcend the generation. But there's another person in the world, just in a small community, that's doing the exact same thing they're doing, and that is just as powerful. I mean, not just as powerful, but just as strong, understands life to the same qualities, in the same happiness, and the same joy. They get the same purpose and joy out of life as the Kobe Bryant. They're just doing it in a different way. So that's how I would explain greatness.
I couldn't agree more. Now I know how your kids feel, but that was beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed. I knew you, but now I know you so much more, and you gave me so much more than I expected. And thank you so much. It was a privilege to be your teammate in the past, and I look forward to growing our relationship. Where can people listen to your positive and influential messages, and if they want to raise awareness and donate for the Future Foundation, where should they go?
Yeah, so we have a donation page on forthefuture.org, forthefuturefoundation.org. And then anything helps with that. Our mission is to obviously continue to influence communities and build relationships, but whether that's through sport or through speaking or through camps or through access to information. So anything helps there. And then for me, I do my social media thing. I don't know if I'm quite influential. I'm a hands-on person. Like I like to meet face to face, talk face to face, and have these types of conversations face to face. So I do get deep, but maybe I'll start to share a little bit more of that side of me on social. But my Instagram handle is Lyle4Thompson. I think it's the same across the board for Twitter, and I don't have TikTok yet. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much for coming on, Lyle. It was a privilege.
Yeah, it was fun. I like these types of conversations, and I love your quotes, your sort of, I don't know how you remember all those types of quotes, but the one that really sticks is the paper cut one. To really look at that. I'm going to be writing about that later tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.